Hello there. How are you doing? And welcome to another episode of Security Nuggets podcast. I'm your host, Ashley. And as always, I'm happy to see you here. Welcome. Today, we're talking about service level agreements, SLAs, in a continuation of a series of the topic of outsourcing security services and products. Now, we talk about SLAs today. Now, what are SLAs? Now, SLAs are a written agreement which defines the minimum level of required service from a service provider under a contract. Now, SLAs are very important and they should be prepared right at the time where the contract is being prepared. And the two should go hand in hand because some of the terms under the SLA fall under some of the clauses in the contract. So they should go hand in hand. Now, the reason why it's very important for us to have SLAs attached to contracts is because one, they set clear expectations for both parties. Both parties in reference to the service provider, who is the vendor, they're aware of the expectations under the contract. And the organization, that's the client, is also aware of the expectations under the contract. So the SLA clearly defines that on paper. And the other essential importance is that SLAs define responsibilities. Everybody from both parties knows what their role is under the contract. They're aware of their responsibilities. It also ensures that the performance is properly monitored. That's what SLAs do. They monitor performance effectively, all right? So all this information and all these details are on paper. They are on paper for reference purposes as well as execution, and also just to guide both parties on how the contract is going to be executed. Now, what are the concepts that you would expect to be under a service level agreement? Now, these are the mandatory concepts in every SLA, and they're quite important. One, the metrics. Every SLA should have a system or a standard of measuring performance, okay? And that it depends on the nature of service that's being provided, all right? But whichever the service, the security service being provided, there should be a metrics that actually sets the standard that performance is supposed to be measured against. Now, when we talk of metrics, let's come up with a few examples, a few aspect examples that can be under metrics. There can be an aspect of availability, all right, in reference to service availability. When is service available? What duration of time is service available, all right? So that is defined very well within the SLA. Under the metrics, as well as the aspect of response, all right? In case of an issue or in case of an incident, all right? What response time are we looking at, okay? What time should the service provider take to respond to an issue or an incident, okay? So response is another aspect that can be utilized under metrics. Resolution, all right, is another aspect in reference to what time does it take for the service provider to solve an issue or an incident when it happens. As well as reliability, okay? How is the consistency of the service? And how reliable is the service, okay? So that's another aspect that you can put under the metrics. But remember, we are using the service level agreement to monitor performance. So we've got to have a system that helps us to measure that performance against, okay? So every SLA should have its metrics under there, well defined and articulated. Now, the other concept that we expect to see in an SLA is there should be some form of monitoring mechanism. Remember, we are monitoring service performance from the service provider, all right? So it goes without saying that that's the number one thing that we should have in place. We should have a monitoring mechanism, ideally as an organization or as the client receiving the service from the service provider. How are we tracking them? How are we tracking and monitoring their performance? All right. Are we having a monitoring process? Are we having monitoring procedures in place? All right. And what are the timelines of monitoring and tracking? How are we going about it? How are we recording? How are we recording the performance? All right. How are we recording it? All right. Where are we recording it? All right. Because we've got to have a monitoring mechanism for us to actually evaluate the progress of the performance. Okay. Now, the other concept that should also fall under the SLA is the concept of reporting mechanism. Okay. There should be a reporting mechanism. Okay. What are the procedures and processes that we are utilizing to actually report the performance of the service provider? All right. What are the procedures we're using? What are the processes and how are we doing it? Now, for instance, are we reporting performance on a monthly basis, where by the end of the month, we are doing an audit report and sharing with stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, on the performance of that service provider? Or are we sending reports on a bi-monthly basis or quarterly basis, all right, or annually basis? Depends on how you want to go about it, okay? But there should be a reporting mechanism in place, all right? Are we reporting via written reports, or are we also holding meetings as stakeholders from both parties to present performance and discuss performance? All that should be defined and outlined under the reporting mechanism, all right? Now, another concept that we should expect to see under the SLA is on escalation, all right? When there's an issue or incident and there's need for us to escalate, how do we go about it? Are we going to have processes in place? Are we going to have procedures that need to be followed in place? Are we going to have responsible stakeholders whom have that responsibility of escalating issues to, for them to take action? Okay. So what are the processes of escalation? What are the procedures of escalation? Who are responsible for escalation, all right? And what action are we expecting when issues and incidents are escalated, all right? So that should be there, well outlined and defined. And obviously, we should have the concept of penalties for non-compliance, all right? Remember, we are laying down expectations from both parties and we are defining what each party is expected to do, all right? Now, remember as well, the SLA is not one-sided, okay? Expectations and whatever we are defining is for both parties to deliberate upon, okay, or uphold. So when it comes to non-compliance, if either party does not comply with the set standards of the SLA, what are the penalties, all right? And if they exceed expectation, are we looking at having a rewarding or an incentive, program going on whereby we are rewarding service providers for exceeded expectation? Now, for instance, as an organization who is a client and you're having a service provider and you're very happy with the way they are performing their work and they're delivering their services, and decide you want to give them more work, you want to expand their contract and give them more work because you're already happy with the work that they're already doing for you, right? So that can be can fall under the rewarding program for you. You can also decide to reward them by referring their services to other potential clients, okay? so you can be a reference for them. That is another way of, it's a non-monetary reward system that you can adopt. If you're an organization that doesn't have a problem with using monetary rewards, that is rewards in form of money and finances, if you don't have a problem using monetary rewards, go ahead and do it. I mean, reward your service provider if they exceed expectations, okay? We shouldn't always focus on the negative things whereby we are looking out to we're just looking out for the negatives, whereby we are just concerned and keen to see where the service provider is falling short of performance, so that we can, get our guns blazing and point fingers at them. Well, that happens, and there's always a way to go around it. But also, we should also look at their good performances and when they're exceeding expectations, okay? When they're doing a good job, all right? As an organization who is getting the service, you are the client getting the service from the service provider, okay? They can also have their own demands, and they can define some terms and conditions under the SLA, under that concept of penalties for non-compliance. For instance, when it comes to payments, I mean, what should you get a penalty as a client for not paying them after service has been delivered, or late payment after service has been delivered? So it's not just one way. The SLA should also aim to look at the service provider's interest. You know what I mean? It's not one-sided, okay? And remember, at the end of the day, the purpose of having an SLA also is because we want to have these good relationships with our service providers as organizations. We want to have good relationships with them, and we want to have as minimal conflict as possible. And where conflicts arises, because sometimes it's out of our hands, things happen and you find yourself in a position where you're conflicting with a service provider. Even when that happens, the SLA guides us into resolving those disputes amicably, which brings me to the final concept that we should hope to find in a service level agreement: the concept of dispute and resolution. It should be well defined under the service level agreement. In case of dispute, how long should either party take, depending on the nature of the dispute? How long should either party take to resolve the dispute? All right. And what sort of procedures should be followed so as to resolve the dispute? Okay. As I mentioned, at the end of the day, we are hoping to maintain good and healthy relationships between organizations and service providers. So it is very important for us to actually have a mechanism going in place that clearly outlines and defines the manner at which disputes and resolutions are handled and managed. It is also worth noting that SLAs should remain up to date, which means that they should be regularly updated and reviewed as you move forward in that partnership, okay? Remember, as times change and as things evolve, so should the manner at which service is delivered, all right? So in order to align the SLAs with those changes within organizations, then we need to ensure that they are open to change. They are adaptable. The relevance of the SLA is very much tied to it being updated to match the changes and the evolving times of an organization. So it's very important for you to keep reviewing them time and again. Well, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching. Until our next episode, it's goodbye from me.